Welcome to another edition of Ask Andrew, where each week I answer a film-related question submitted by a member of the BMFI community. This week's question: do you have any science fiction recommendations? Outside of 2001: A Space Odyssey, Alien, and The Day the Earth Stood Still, I haven't really seen anything that compelling. There are a lot of possible titles to mention here, and there are many, many lists on the internet, certainly. But a lot of this boils down to what type or variety of science fiction you particularly care for. As is obvious, I think, certainly from the film Alien, and indeed from that whole series, science fiction is a genre that is very readily combined with other genres. For example, the first Alien, which is a terrific film, combined science fiction and horror. The second film in that series, Aliens, which is also wonderful, combines science fiction and with the war picture genre. Another movie that I really think is terrific, also as it turns out from the director of Aliens, James Cameron, is Terminator, which kind of combines, science fiction with a slasher film. So it is able to combine with a number of different genres, and this means that science fiction films vary greatly from the sort of existential kind that we see with something like Solaris or 2001: A Space Odyssey, and to even to some extent Gravity, to comedies like Galaxy Quest and Back to the Future, and kind of everything in between. That all being said, I do have a few titles to suggest that I think offer some variety among them, depending on sort of what type of science fiction you're in the mood for. If you're more interested in more thoughtful and contemplative and less sort of action-packed science fiction, check out a movie like Gattaca from the late 90s. It stars Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman, and interestingly, Gore Vidal. And it is about a future where technology has enabled people to some extent, sort of plot their life based on their genetic code and the potential that that genetic code suggests from birth. And it raises lots of interesting questions, and it has elements of suspense and mystery, and some wonderful performances from supporting players, including Alan Arkin, and as I mentioned, Gore Vidal. So that's a movie worth checking out, I think. Going way back to the 1920s, I would suggest the Fritz Lang film Metropolis. In many ways, an incredibly influential science fiction film. If you see it or have seen it, you can readily see how it influenced movies like Blade Runner and Star Wars and The Matrix and a host of others. It really is a breathtaking film for its visual elements, given its time period. And it is a compelling film, given its performances and editing and overall aesthetic for any time period. But it's a very ambitious science fiction movie that, as I said, has had far-reaching influence, far beyond Germany and many, many decades into the future. So that's worth checking out. Another film that is admittedly not everybody's cup of tea is a sort of French New Wave science fiction film, if you can wrap your head around that, called Alphaville. It combines elements of film noir and science fiction with a French New Wave style, and pretty much no visual effects, yet still creates many of the sort of stylistic elements and represents some of the themes of the science fiction picture. Another film which is very much reliant on special effects and is a much more recent movie is The Martian. I find this movie endlessly watchable. I'm not entirely sure why, but it is about a time in the not too distant future when human space travel to Mars is not only possible, but is relatively commonplace, at least as commonplace as space shuttle flights were up until a few years ago. But it really it's has great performances. It has a sense of humor. It has some emotion and some suspense as well. And it's just beautiful to look at. If you are interested in a little more sort of action and a little more kind of adventure in your science fiction, there's Blade Runner, which I'm going to guess you saw, but just forgot to put on your list. But that movie, which also combines film noir elements, interestingly, is really a very influential science fiction film, a visually stunning one, but also thoughtfully engages with some themes. A movie or a series of movies that engages with a number of interesting themes from science fiction and beyond, but also has very powerful performances and is surprisingly emotionally resonant. It's the series of recent Planet of the Apes films, Rise of, Dawn of, and War for the Planet of the Apes, all of which feature Andy Serkis as Caesar, the main ape protagonist, in what are just simply stunning motion capture performances. And there are other great performances and other powerful themes in those films as well. So I think they're definitely worth checking out. And the last in this run I would suggest is Minority Report, a Steven Spielberg movie based on a short story by Philip K. Dick, who also wrote the story on which Blade Runner is based. It stars Tom Cruise as a police officer in the future when there is a Bureau of Pre-Crime where the government has the ability to see into the future through some oracles who are then able to predict who will commit crimes, and they're able to police based on that. And of course, the tables get turned, so to speak, when this occurs. And there's a good amount of suspense and action, and it's Spielberg, so I know it's going to be really visually stunning. But it's also raises some interesting questions, so I think that's worth checking out. And finally, if you don't want to have to think too much, but you like the action and adventure and look of science fiction films, there are two more recent films I would suggest. One is the reboot of Star Trek from 2009. I enjoyed this a great deal, but I know some people who were very committed Star Trek fans who said it was a very entertaining movie, but not a great Star Trek movie. I don't know about that. I just know it was darn entertaining and definitely falls into the realm of science fiction, as does Edge of Tomorrow, starring Emily Blunt and Tom Cruise as two soldiers in a seemingly interminable battle against an alien invasion sometime in the future. A wonderfully entertaining film that doesn't really raise too many questions, or at least doesn't dwell on the questions it raises, but is very entertaining and quite action packed. So there are some options. I hope you might find something in there that you find engaging. Please follow up and let me know if you do. And if any of you watching this have your own film-related questions, please visit the Film Studies Online section of brynmarfilm.org and use the Ask Andrew form to send them in. Who knows? Next time I could be answering your question.